Hello, good morning and welcome. It's Wednesday, January the 21st, and a big political disruptor is heading for Davos. No, not just Donald Trump, but Nigel Farage, who scolded Davos globalisers for years, but now he's about to join the fun over here in the snow. After Keir Starmer decided not to attend, he's the only UK party leader who'll be here in the Swiss mountains this week. My name is Anne McElvoy from Politico.
And I'm Sam Coates of Sky News. So much more on that in just a second. But before we get into the meat and potatoes today, I've got some nice news for you, Anne. We've been nominated for an award, Podcast of the Year. This is great. It's the DigiDay European Media Awards. So that's nice. They're essentially a sort of advertising media company. But the reason for pointing it out, not just to congratulate ourselves, but it's the kind of other podcasts that we're up against. So this is a category with Politics and Sam and Anne, the L'Oreal Group, This Is Not a Beauty podcast, and the MasterCard Touch podcast. So I have to confess, minor bafflement that we've arrived, although we've definitely arrived, find out first week of February. I think what's going on here is that we've got, thanks to you listeners, a very, very special and quite unusual audience. I mean, we welcome all of our listeners, but quite a lot of them come from that SW1 Westminster postcode, who it's quite unusual, I think, to have quite such a high density. So I think it's a reflection of that. But whatever it is, will we beat the beauty queens?
Well, when I signed up to do this podcast with Sam Coates, I actually thought it was a beauty podcast, and it was just a misunderstanding, but we just kept it going anyway, and we decided to do a bit of politics on the side, as well as Sam's early morning beauty tips.
Back to the substance. Well, Donald Trump's arrival was delayed by an electrical fault on Air Force One. British government attitude to the US president's recent Exocet missiles is bleak. And I was messaging somebody involved in trying to work out what to do now, what's going on, who's working inside government. And they just said, I don't think rational arguments are cutting through right now. We should just send a shiver down the whole Whitehall machine. It's hard to work when you're facing that. And frankly, with other G7 leaders not really getting an audience with Donald Trump in Davos when he finally arrives, or at least as far as we know, my sense is that it's not entirely clear what the way forward is here.
I think it'll also be quite galling for some British politicians as they're stuck at Prime Minister's questions in Westminster, watching the Reform UK leader turning up here. Of course, it's just a fantastic photo and television and video opportunity for him as well to be paying homage to the MAGA crowd at USA House on the promenade. So in the heart of the action where Donald Trump and his team are going to be. And Nigel Farage also has an event tomorrow, and we're told he's going to deliver a quite stark and blunt message there to Davos man and woman, as opposed to the usual shy and retiring Nigel, I guess.
Good unpicking of reform spin. I do love the image of anti-elite warrior Farage, the hammer of big business and global institutions there, next in the snow, next to the DJ decks and the celebrities. It's sort of, I mean, it goes without saying that this will be winding up the British political establishment no end. He'll be just accusing of hypocrisy and all the rest of it, and he'll be loving every bit of it. But there's sort of policy about this too, which will worry them, because of course Nigel Farage will be fueling President Trump and his team's criticism that we talked about in yesterday's podcast of what's going on in the Chagos Islands. He will be fueling their criticism, the American administration's criticism of the Chinese embassy decision, and winding everybody up about the sort of chatter about the social media platform X being banned because of the Grok AI ability to unclothe people online. So Nigel Farage is able to press some of the pressure points that are particularly sensitive at the moment, particularly that new open sore, which was that reversal of the president's support for the British decision to hand away the Chagos Islands and just lease back the Diego Garcia military base.
And it's still a bit mysterious what's driving that. Yeah, I was talking to some senior diplomats on the UK side about that who had thought that everything was pretty much tickety-boo with the US over the UK Chagos Islands deal. It turns out not so much. And people were asking who's got in Donald Trump's hear about this. Various arcane theories were going around, but as you say, it's really been quite a reversal of fortune on that one. And last night in a mega press conference, Donald Trump doubled down on his criticism of the Starmer government. And he is talking to the Sun's Harry Cole.
I think that when they originally were going to do it, they were talking about doing some concept of ownership. But now they're looking to essentially just do a lease and sell it. And I'm against that. It's a reasonably nothing like Greenland, but it's a reasonably important area of the globe. Not to anywhere near Greenland, but I think they should keep it. I don't know why they're doing it. Do they need money?
So that just shows that the change in position on Chagos is not a flash in the pan. He said it, he means it. There it is on camera, as opposed to just Truth Social from 18 hours before. So I think there'll be a lot of worry about that. Whether or not it changes anything is not clear. That's the point that government ministers were making yesterday. The treaty's done, the legislation's nearly done, but it is a diplomatic disaster, quite frankly. The one area, interestingly, that Nigel Farage does align with the UK government is Greenland and what's been going on there with Trump's imperial ambition. Farage was arguing that it's one of those issues that, while friends usually disagree in private, on this, he thinks that a US president threatening tariffs, unless he can take over Greenland without the consent of the people, is a very hostile act. Those are the words that he used yesterday. And that's what he said, in fact, in an interview with US House Speaker Mike Johnson. So there is at least a cross-party consensus on that. And Nigel Farage says he'll go and talk to the MAGA crowd about that today. Again, galling for Keir Starmer as he's stuck at the dispatch box.
And what there does seem to be now is growing divergence between the more softly approach of the UK on this issue, Sam, and particularly about not getting drawn into heated arguments about that additional tariff threat, and the EU. And we've got a couple of pieces of evidence about that, some interviews I've gathered here and some from my colleagues across Europe on whether the EU is getting its act together a bit and becoming a bit punchier on the subject of Greenland and all that follows.
I'm not going to lie, it's really useful having you there gathering around it, because it helps paint this picture of Britain determinedly trying not to publicly inflame the relationship with the US, whilst the EU position just hardens and hardens, so our gap with the EU gets bigger and bigger. Right. You've been interviewing the Finnish foreign minister, who will reflect the EU view. And I've already heard this thing that you're about to hear. I was really struck by the language you're about to hear.
Yes, I caught up with Alina Valtonen, who did not hold back. Very forthright, the Finnish foreign minister, as you can hear.
Well, that's why I'm saying that this is basically up to the American people to decide on which side of history they want to be. So on the side of, providing freedom to the world and prosperity to their own people, or whether, they want to join the camp of... I might use the word predators, but Russia and many autocratic countries are behaving exactly in a way that they are not looking for friends, but are just looking for short-term benefit.
What about the wider EU response?
Well, the use of that word predator, I think is a signal that a lot of countries in Europe are thinking, what is the point of being polite anymore? She's particularly out there on that and wanted to underline it with the use of that word. But if you look at the wider EU response as well, the big news out of the Politico Europe side this morning, there was a lot of country correspondents and analysts that got together on this, Sam, was to do this big analysis suggesting that the EU is finally getting serious about a counterattack on Donald Trump, reporting Germany is moving more into line with France, supporting use of the EU's big trade weapon, the bazooka, so-called, to retaliate against the White House, not taking the punishment beating lying down anymore. Now, the German Chancellor, Friedrich Merz, has often been the figure trying to soften the bombastic approach of Emmanuel Macron. You'd have seen him around here in his reflector aviator sunglasses. I actually passed him last night with his sort of phalanx of I counted about 18 people. Whenever Emmanuel goes for a walk, about 18 people and some of whom in military uniform who go for a walk with him. It's fully French. But Germany now joining France in saying it will ask the Commission to explore unleashing the anti-coercion instrument at an emergency EU leaders summit in Brussels on Thursday evening. That really will be a moment of high drama for Europe.
Yeah, that is the EU tiptoeing towards economic warfare after Germany fell into line with France. Massive, massive stuff. I suppose I want to know from you, Anne, as we're on the precipice of maybe the EU doing things like really hostile tariffs on strategic goods, excluding US companies from tenders, restricting exports on strategic goods to the US, massive stuff that would harm the EU. Where this leaves Britain, I mean, an obvious point, if we had been pre-2021, we'd be in the customs union, we'd be forced to take part of this, whether we liked it or not. That plays into the domestic debate about the customs union. Significantly, Peter Kyle said he wasn't interested in, and Rachel Reeves saying they're not interested in rejoining the EU customs union in interviews in the last couple of days. So we're carving our own response, but is it robust? Is it significant? Is it an individual one? What are you hearing we're saying?
Can I just say that's such a good point about the customs union and how that argument is going to play out, particularly for those who are in favour of it in Labour and have been pushing from it. We would absolutely be being, whether willingly or otherwise, dragged towards using retaliatory measures on the US. And perhaps I hadn't quite thought of it in that way. But what we're really seeing here on trade on Greenland from the UK, it's the dog that's not barking in the night. Whereas I think to stretch the metaphor, the European hounds certainly are. We are taking different paths. And Yvette Cooper, she will be here today meeting other foreign ministers, but I gather that she's going to be focusing on some things that she will say are falling off the table here at Davos. That's the role of the UK, so to put things perhaps back into the debate that might be getting neglected. She wants to focus on Gaza. There'll be no mention of that contentious board of peace, or at least there hasn't been so far, but she will be emphasizing the need to keep implementing the peace plan in Gaza so that it doesn't go backwards. She's avoiding direct confrontation with the Trump-shaped plan on that one as well. And she's going to chair a Ukraine meeting, making the point that that crisis mustn't be forgotten. This was supposed to be the Davos where we edged towards that peace deal, at least get the Ukraine and the US aligned on that. That doesn't seem to be happening. Donald Trump's attention is elsewhere. So she's going to be talking about how to boost energy security for Ukraine. But, that is very different from what we're going to be hearing from the European capitals. And we can see Macron absolutely determinedly, he keeps, some of them have leaked, sending out all of these invites to fellow Europeans to get their act together by the end of the week. It does look like we're heading into a much tougher European response. Well, the UK is still being, polite.
Look, one person's re-upping topics that are not getting enough attention is another person's foreign secretary going on about stuff nobody really wants to hear, if you were being a little bit glass half full about it. I am interested, just briefly, Anne, in sort of what it's like being a Brit at the moment, what your perception of global attitudes at a gathering like that is towards the UK and the UK government and the UK state, because we hear an American view, which is quite gloom-mongery. We hear British ministers try to, go, no, we're back. What does it feel like to you?
I would say it feels like a quiet presence, not hosting anything like those big trade events that the UK used to do. But we do have presence here. We've got Peter Kyle tagging along tech investors and founders to show that Britain's not just doing legacy businesses and a bit of light financial services. And Rachel Reeves being seen on panels with JP Morgan's Jamie Dimon. He's if Davos man had a hierarchy, then he's pretty much towards the top of that. That's good optics, and also alongside Bank of America's Brian Moynihan. So we're present, but I would say it's not the noisiest year that I've seen the Brits at Davos. And your question about attitude is really nicely summed up by something, an interview I did, because we're doing an extra EU confidential podcast on the impact of Trump and what's going to happen today on the whole of Europe and the UK. That'll be out tomorrow. But I was recording ahead for that, and I caught up with Ken Rogoff, the doyen of American economists. You might remember he was very close to George Osborne, often consulted by him on austerity and how to get out of austerity in those days. Also a chess grandmaster, so he knows Rachel Reeves well, even when she was a very young chess player, and always had a bit of a soft spot for her, I think, on that score. But have a listen to the note of concern that he sounds about the direction of Labour on the economy and the constraints that he thinks Labour MPs are putting on the Chancellor.
I mean, I think she's very good, and I have been a supporter of hers, but she's obviously in a very tough place because she's in a party that will not accept any compromise on let's make everything free, kind of philosophy. And you're the chancellor and you're supposed to make choices. So, it's very distressing when I go to the UK. There's no question she's not popular, in broad circles. I think, it's a very tough job that she's doing. But, at the end of the day, she has to make choices. She's very constrained by the choices. And something's going to have to give at some point, that either her party is going to have to make some concession to reform some of the welfare state in the UK in order to be able to boost these other growth areas, or, they're going to end up having 15% of the vote in the next election.
Concern about the wider British economy there from Ken Rogoff. We've got some breaking news. In the last few moments, the Office for National Statistics has said that inflation, the CPI measurement, is now up to 3.4% in the 12 months to December 2025. It was at 3.2% a month ago. So that's the wrong direction there. Rachel Reeves has been at it again in Davos, though, in a newsmaking interview. She said that the Treasury's in a very strong position to withstand shocks to the public finances without further tax increases. Bing, there she goes. No more tax increases. Let's bookmark this, saying that because she doubled her headroom against her fiscal rules in November's budget, she's got greater confidence that they can have stability on the fiscal front. Right. Okay, Rachel Reeves, big claim. But of course, you are sitting in Davos, where the US president is threatening additional tariffs on the UK economy, which would have an impact on our economy. Are you really prepared for that headroom not to be squeezed that much? Are you prepared for it to go down to 10 billion? Do you really have a lot of scope for that? I am unsure, but I am certainly bookmarking that. That is a sort of domestic segue towards what's going on back in the UK, because what goes on in Davos actually isn't that far away.
Yeah, let's turn to what is going on back at home. I vaguely remember a place that wasn't full of late night fondue parties and very expensive wine. Is it all Greenland and Donald Trump on the domestic front, the way I'm getting it here, Sam?
Not really. You'll be delighted to know that navel gazing is in full swing in Portcullis House, where I spent much of yesterday.
I was kind of missing it.
An ex-Tory cabinet minister was heading to the Conservatives for Europe party, saying proudly that his assumption was there was not a single sitting Tory MP would be there. The Tories generally pretty chipper about Kemi Badenoch's response to Robert Jenrick last week, with our polling that suggests there's no reform bounce from that, and Labour, well, a lot of them are stuck on internal woes and the U-turns that we keep talking about and the like.
I can see from the papers Starmer facing jabs from both Andy Burnham, it's that man again, and Angela Rayner, still trying to make the weather and make sure that they're on the playing field. So the Greater Manchester Mayor was back to saying the UK is in a rut and in hock to the bond markets, which is very much not the government's line. I mean, it's certainly not the Davos line. This place literally is the bond markets.
One government source messaged me to say, sounds like Liz Truss, but to me, it sounds like Andy Burnham emboldened. So I actually think it's quite important. He also has this idea that you might not need whipping if you were running the House of Commons, which sounds as a brave idea. You could do everything by consensus. So good luck to that. The other person that's putting their head above the parapet, as you say, is Angela Rayner.
So she wrote an article in The Guardian yesterday gaining traction on the reforms to leaseholds capping ground rents. That's something both Tory and now Labour don't seem to be able to agree on. But essentially, she's getting her fighting gloves back on, isn't she?
Yeah, and she's punching a bruise. Right, this is an issue that is stuck on Keir Starmer's desk, right? There was an election pledge to end unaffordable ground rent. It's a techie thing, But there are huge vested interests on both sides. On the one hand, there's 100 plus Labour MPs, according to my colleague Faye Brown, willing to rebel on this if the government doesn't do what Angela Rayner wants, right? Massive, massive, big deal. And frankly, I was hearing the same from Labour MPs yesterday. On the other side, investors, pension funds going, you're about to crater the rate of our investment and we're not going to invest in Britain if you're going to do stuff like this and change the rules halfway through. Real concern from there as well. But the bigger political point is, as a result of these two competing interests, the issue is simply for Keir Starmer to decide, and it's been sitting on his desk and sitting and sitting and sitting. And there are all sorts of bits of the government machine that are just sort of blowing their mind that the Prime Minister just can't make a blinking decision. Now, this might come in the next couple of days, but, been saying that for a long time, apparently. And he just has to show he can come down on one side or another. This is another story that speaks to a kind of a bigger damaging picture.
Yes, there is something evergreen about that. I doubt it's the last we're going to hear of that one.
Right, we've bust our time limit. But we can't go before I just ask you, Anne, how is your hardship posting?
Well, yeah, I brought my bragging rights with me, actually courtesy of Anthony Scaramucci. You might remember, very briefly, communications boss for Donald Trump, and now an excellent US podcaster on The Rest is Politics US. And he always hosts this fantastic wine party with his company, Skybridge. And he had this amazing array of wines. So I just looked one up to compare it with, occasionally Sam Cates and I have a glass of, supermarket red wine. That can happen. But instead we got 1983 Chateau Lafite Rothschild, praised for its power and its finesse, its elegance, and its maturity. It was considered young for many years, but it is now entering its drinking window. And some use was made of that. I did check the price, but it's so eye-watering, I don't think you want to know.
I checked the price as well, and it's between £500 and £1,300, Anne. So I'm not going to spare your blushes. Right, we will see you tomorrow for Politics at Sam and Anne's God knows where the world will be then. See you then.
See you then. Sober and here.